I'm sitting here today with one of the most influential HR people in India, Abhijit Bhaduri. Abhijit has over 850k followers on LinkedIn. He's an author who has published 4 books across business, management, and fiction. He consults on talent strategy, leadership, and organization culture. He was the chief learning officer at Wipro, which is one of the biggest companies from India. Prior to that, he has led HR at Microsoft, Pepsico, Colgate, and Tata Steel, which are some of the other big companies in India. Abhijit is a popular keynote speaker. He has spoken at TEDx, Inc., NASCOM, and several B schools in India and abroad. He was described by Forbes magazine as one of the India's most interesting globalists, and by LinkedIn as one of the persons you writers you must follow. With all these accomplishments under his belt, you can only imagine my excitement in talking career with the man himself. Abhijit, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you, Salman, for having me here.
So, how has your day been?
Oh, day has been lovely. I get up pretty early, so
Okay.
I spent a fair bit of time in the morning writing. So
Awesome.
that's
Tell me
my
about that. How does that work? What time do you wake up and what kind of writing do you do in the mornings?
usually I wake up by about 4:30 or 5. Depending on what time I've gone to bed, and I write about So right now I'm working on my next book called Dreamers and Unicorns. So I'm just in the final phases of the manuscript. I'm just putting that together.
Awesome. And how much time does it take you to compile a book?
Enormous amount of time because I usually end up doing multiple drafts. So even though it is just one final published book, but you probably have 3 or 4 completely independent books which are a byproduct of what you finally publish.
Okay. So even in terms of your recent online activity, as I was going through that, I see that you do a lot of writing and a lot of work. I mean, and been doing edit for years. So what is that like? Can you tell me in terms of how you think about your online activity and what is the effort and reward like on that?
I think the online activity for me primarily is when I react to a business news, whatever is happening around the world, I sort of write about that. And what I try to do is, in the process of writing, for me, writing is also a process of visualizing something that the reader should visualize. So one of the ways I do it is I actually um, draw out what I'm going to write. So the key idea or the key aspect of what I want to focus on. And as you build that, the drawing then becomes like a central piece which helps me to write. Initially, in the early couple of years when I was blogging, I would illustrate it separately, and then I kind of thought that why duplicate the work? I have that drawing any case with me, and I simply decided to just maybe sometimes make it a little prettier by adding color to it or something. But essentially, that's the process.
Awesome. In fact, yeah, the drawings are like so interesting in themselves. Like it's like a very uh, insightful infographic that you have, like a proper LinkedIn material, but not a format that you actually see on LinkedIn. So what has that been like? Is art something that you've been interested in from like your childhood or something? Does it come to you like that, or is it something you have developed more recently and also Gordon introduced you to creative in terms of writing and everything? How has that been like?
I've drawn before, so I used to draw a little bit for my school magazine, the usual thing that everyone does. But then I decided to um, s- focus more on, doing caricatures and cartoons and all of that.
When was that?
That was in college,
Okay.
usually. That's when I did most of my work in cartooning. And that then now has sort of evolved into this whole piece that I add a little cartoon somewhere or I add a caricature of a person whose work I'm referencing.
Okay.
And so I've just basically combined my passion for drawing, caricatures with my writing. So that just
And does it bring you joy? I mean,
Oh, I
in
love
addition to
it.
the value that you bring through
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I just totally love it, and I think for me the reaction of the readers is a great way for me to keep improving because sometimes people say that okay, what is I didn't like this, or I would have wanted something different. And that's actually a great way for you to improve both your writing as well as the drawing. So,
Okay.
having that is a massive advantage.
Okay, so I want to come back to the online activity. Now, first what does your LinkedIn look like? You have 850K followers and all that. And also, I want your perspective on personal branding for everybody. I've heard you speak previously about how kind of branding yourself has like a competitive advantage over a CV and things like that. So, what do you think? How should a normal person who is not particularly building a company or has any objective like that still think about personal branding and using social media effectively?
So I think social media is really more about the social part of it than the media part of it. It's really about how do you engage with different kinds of people. And there are again, two kinds of social media posts that you will see. You do have some people who write about one particular topic. So if there is a person who's for instance, in cricket, you have someone called Cricketwala who writes only about cricket and just does an amazing job of it. So that's one kind of social media possibility. The other is, I like to write about all the different things that I do, whether it's my travel or it's my writing or my, amateurish attempt at photography or writing fiction or anything that I do. I sort of put that on social. So what happens is I not only sort of get an opportunity to talk about the professional aspects. I could be writing about technology and HR because that's
Yeah.
one of the areas I care about. Or beyond that, I can also talk about my interest in a book that moved me, or a movie that I watched which was amazing and it set me thinking. All of that can be brought in. So what happens is that the person who's reading this not only gets to read the content in terms of whatever is the professional piece or the fun piece that you're writing about, but who's the person behind that. That is
Okay.
really most often.
So it gives a picture of the personality itself, and
Yeah,
that is
I think you bring
yeah.
all your as well your strengths as well as your flaws.
Now, from a HR perspective, from a company perspective, how is a company thinking about the person's social presence, ideally in the future as well?
So, our digital footprint is everywhere anyway. So every time you use a credit card or you kind of visit a web page or, you write a post or you put a Facebook like, anything that you are doing actually creates a digital footprint. And it is, think about it like, when you see these pictures, the more pixels that you have, the more clear the picture is. So the more pixels you have in your digital footprint, each one of them actually combines to create a much sharper image of you. And that gives sometimes, that's a great way for people to signal to a potential employer the kind of things that you care about or the kind of things you're good at. If you're good at it, don't just make that claim in your resume, which is how it used to be in the pre-digital world or the pre-social world. Today, the belief is that if you're good at something, show it to me. Don't tell me that you're good at it. Help
Yeah.
somebody benefit from it. So I think both are good ways in which you
So,
can do that.
as employees, should we actually focus on it? Like, how much of our attention do we give to our online activity? Should we actually take deliberate, schedule time in our calendar to, write out our, represent our thought leadership any form or possible?
I think if you want to sustain a habit, it's really like saying, I go to the gym one time on New Year's Day and say that, okay, I am going to be, working out every single day. The only way that's going to happen is you find a time that works for you, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever works for you. Is the same thing with either your writing or your social media presence or your drawing, whatever. If that is going to be a part of your brand, I mean, it's a one-off activity, that's different.
Okay.
But if it's really going to be, something that people associate with you and you build your presence there, then I think you are really looking to do that on a sustained basis. So having a calendar or a time blocked really helps. For me, I write the best. It's most efficient for me if I write it first thing in the morning when I wake up. But for a lot of people, that doesn't work.
Yes.
So you do what works for you. But for example, but it's all about the frequency and the predictability. Think about your content really like a newspaper or a magazine. Are you a daily newspaper? Are you a weekly newspaper? And there's no such thing as an occasional newspaper.
Okay, yeah.
You don't know when to expect that.
Okay. Now I want to understand with you from a personal perspective again, like what is the kind of rewards you have received from LinkedIn, and what is, LinkedIn or a social platform, like, have you scored gigs on that, or do people, what is the kind of relationship we can have with a social media professionally? Like obviously, LinkedIn itself benefits a lot from people like you who put a lot of thoughtful content out there. But us on the other side, like, what are the kind of rewards professionally should we?
So, from the point of view of what the posts do, personally for me, I would think that putting your content for people to read. I mean, a bigger platform obviously means a larger number of people are reading what you are having to say and engaging with you. And so, I think when you want to get the opinion of people on a certain topic, and say, how do you see this? Through the comments you actually learn. So that's a process not only of refining your own craft, but also of improving your own thinking and looking at diverse perspectives. And somebody says, why didn't you write about this?
Okay, so
And
there's learning just by
enormous amount of
sharing.
it.
Okay.
But also from another point of view, I got an opportunity to be invited as an Adobe Insider. So, Adobe handpicks a bunch of people as social media influencers. So I got a chance to travel to the Adobe summits, speak at their think tank,
Awesome.
engage with them in their work here in different countries. So I got a chance to be part of the Adobe Max conference or the Adobe Summit conference in multiple ways, and listen to the most amazing people. Get a ringside view and do all of that. I would have never had that opportunity.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Also, I think the opportunity to learn about the world from multiple points of view when you meet people, as you can do online, it's actually expanding your reach dramatically. You're getting influenced by people of many different kinds, which I otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
Awesome.
So I think it's been a very fulfilling possibility. Every year during the Joy of Giving week, I've tried to raise money for a small NGO. Having a
Okay.
larger followership enables me to reach a larger number of people and put out, a request and plea for help. So
That is great. That is great.
it's many different things that I've gained from it.
Awesome. Now I want to ask you about your current role. Like, what is it that you do specifically, and how is your work structured?
I usually work with organizations in three different areas. I work with them on building their leadership skills and capabilities. So I work with the senior leadership teams, heads of businesses, heads of SBUs, etc. All of that and their teams. So that's one kind of work that I do, skill building. The second thing really that I do is helping organizations look at their talent strategy. So typically working with HR teams, the CHRO as part of the team, and building skills for HR to be part of the future enterprise, which is usually, as the function itself is becoming a lot more digital, how does, what are the skills that are going to be more important for that? And then, of course, I work with people on their, working to create a culture that sustains and supports all of this.
Awesome. Now, can you tell me about the skills part? Like, what is the kind of advice you tend to give about skills? Because skills nowadays, I think I personally have a lot of insecurity around skills, especially technical skills. I used to be an Android developer, and at one point I was like, how good can I be? And then I became a marketer. I'm starting to get that insecurity again. I mean, might be a personal problem, but generally I think skills are more short-lived now, and I wanted your take on that.
Yeah, I think the half-life of skills of any kind, it's diminishing. The function that I was a part of, when I started my career in human resources, it was not even called human resources. It was called personnel management, because that's what it was. Then it became HR, and then it's now focusing more towards talent. And now it's actually, like all other functions, is becoming a mix of technology and something else. So if you look at it, everyone's skill base has to get updated, far more frequently. So when you are at the peak of your career, when you're at the peak of what you're trying to do today, is probably the best time to really start saying that before that skill becomes obsolete, let me try and build the next skill that I can then leverage, because skill building takes time. So if you don't start to work on the next skill that's going to happen, what you enjoy working with, what you're good at, what you need to improve your skills at, all of that actually takes a certain amount of time. So it's best done on an ongoing basis. You try out different things, and from there you will discover what is it that you're passionate about, what is really now beginning to catch your interest. So discover that sapling and then help it grow.
So, what should people like generally focus on for a longer term benefit? Like soft skills are a no brainer, right? Soft skills are always going to help you throughout. But what else? Like example, technology. Like what else are there right now that you can invest your effort into, and that will potentially reap you more reward than just learning Java. Example.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you look at what kind of skills in any field, there are technical skills, and along with that, what you described, the soft skills, the way that we work with other people, so the opportunities are going to be, a lot of what we are going to see is anything which is rule based and repetitive and at scale will start to get done by machines. Think about what's happening in face recognition. It is something that machines are becoming really good at. So if you tag your photographs, the machines can retrieve it really quickly.
It's brilliant, yeah.
Yeah. So those kind of things, in every field that you can think of, there is going to be a core skill which is going to keep changing, the hard skill, which as it is called. So whether it is in retail, or it's in, coding, or it's in human resources, the core piece of it will keep changing. But then there are human skills which are there. How do you engage with people? How do you work with teams? How do you influence people in multiple ways? How do you leverage new media? All of these are skills which are going to keep growing in their importance. So I would think of that, and then really trying to see that in what kind of setting would people benefit from that. Ultimately, a market for a skill lies in making it useful to a larger and larger body of people. So, as you build the skill, really try to see that who is
so
going
cool.
to.
I mean, the way you phrased it, very interesting. Yeah, please go ahead.
So, making that skill valuable to a larger number of people. So, for instance, when you see the post that I put on LinkedIn, it's very easy for me to look at the analytics of it and understand that this is a topic that more people care about, and then therefore, I would really like to see that. Why do they care about it? Where are they going to use it? And what can I do to make my content more relevant for them? So that's really the way that I learn what I'm going to work on next.
Okay. Now, in terms of skills again, how much do you think is like the responsibility of your company? Like, what should you expect from your company in terms of skill building? I mean, there's obviously the natural skills that you're gained through through the work you put in, the time you put in, and everything. But also, should we as employees expect the companies to take in the extra mile to actually make sure that these guys are progressing?
It is hard for a company to do it on a sustained basis. Very few companies actually land up doing it on a sustained basis. And, as I said earlier, that it's very hard for people to build their skills with a, 2-day training program in the year, and then that's it. But think about it, an organization has to worry about many people, many different skills, many different possibilities and combinations. It is always inefficient. So if I would sort of say that progressively, I have understood that what you get from the company is a bonus. Look at that as something that has come to you, in addition to what you are doing, because eventually it's your career, your responsibility, what you like to build your focus in. A number of times I've seen that today people pay for their own training programs in an area which the company would not have focused. I mean, I'm in HR, and suppose I decide that I'm interested in learning more about design. it's pretty unlikely that the company is going to send me
Right.
for a course in design. That's something I can do for myself, and maybe I might become much better at that, or I may not.
If supposing I take up such an initiative, you as like the HR department, representing the HR department, is the company happy with your initiative in developing yourself outside of
As I said, that even when you're building any skill, eventually, if there is a market, the market exists because the skill is valuable to somebody else. So if what the company is working on is, and the skill that you bring to the table, what you've learned, is valuable to the company, absolutely yes. But if it is something which is unrelated to the role that you are doing or what the business that the company is into, that is then tougher for the company to recognize and do something about. So that's why I kind of think that building skills is really because that's what you want to do.
okay.
It's not whether the company will recognize it or is the company going to even support it.
Okay.
So I would look at it like that.
Okay. I think you speak about that in the digital tsunami. Could you tell me a little bit about that? And also, I think you have a deep interest in the future of work. So, kind of like, could you shed some light on that? The digital tsunami, as in the book by Abhijit Bhaduri. If you're on camera, here it is.
So the digital tsunami actually was written because the changes that are happening often come to us the way a tsunami does. It's like the tectonic shift happens on the plates of the earth, and then that sort of generates a massive wave. And in that wave, as the wave reaches the shallow ground, that massive wave actually rises above the sea level, and you can see it actually. It becomes like a wall. And that is exactly how the digital tsunami happens. If you look at, just last couple of days, we heard about Thomas Cook collapse. It's a company which has been around for past more than 170 years. And the changes that have not happened overnight. It's not a sudden bolt of electricity. It is really a tectonic shift because the consumer has changed. Technology makes it easy for us to shop online. A lot of aggregators have come in. Google is getting into the travel business. Amazon is rumored to be getting into that. So your competitive landscape is changing. The amount of money people have available to travel has changed. There are different interest groups. People like sometimes they like to stay at home and watch travel movies rather than to actually go and physically travel. So many different changes, when they come together, it creates that tsunami. So many plates moving causes the tsunami, and that's really how work is shifting because the nature of competition, the nature of technology, the consumers, the businesses.
I think AI is a very popular. It's a favorite term among a future of work. Like,
Yeah.
what is the reason for that? Are we like there's so much discussion that half of the jobs is gonna go away to AI. So
Yep, I think eventually, AI is probably going to be like the Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva of jobs. Some jobs will be created, some will be nurtured and augmented, and they'll become, more powerful, and some will get destroyed. So I think, when people shift their skill base to move along with what is happening in the workplaces and in work, that's where I think it is going to create opportunities for people. So for me, my belief is that the number of people organizations will employ to keep on their roles is going to reduce a lot. Because of the unpredictability of demand, organizations find it hard to say that we need so many people really throughout. So that's changing, and which is why the gig work possibilities have increased dramatically for everyone, and that's going to be probably the model for the future.
could you just define that for people who
So
don't
when
know?
you're looking at gig work is the work that you do. You have a skill, you put it in the marketplace, and somebody employs you for a particular short time duration. So it's not a full time job, it's not a part time job, it's a one off job. So the duration of time. The most common example of gig work is looked at as the Zomato delivery person or the Uber driver or Lyft driver or Ola driver. But in effect, there is a massive gig workforce which is emerging in India specifically, but also in other countries like Brazil, China. These are all becoming massive markets. Indonesia becoming a massive market for the gig workforce. And the white collar jobs that are coming in today are really going to be massive. So the opportunity for people to have skills which they can bring to the marketplace, especially if you're an expert, there's no better time than this to be in the gig workforce.
I completely agree with you. At my previous company, we were a team. We were a pretty big team of 5 or 6 people, and at one point we downsized significantly. And but still, we were able to get so much done through Upwork.com, and Upwork is like a community of gig work,
Yes.
talented professionals. And it was just amazing how just through this chat on Upwork you can coordinate and give like such specific communication possible and get your work done. It's just remarkable. Also, that through that, I just wanna ask you about remote work. So on the other side, there's also this concept of remote work, which is like a more contractual, established. Basically, you're an employee with the company, but you're not located at their premises. So what do you think about that in terms of what the future is looking like?
So really, if your question points to the three big shifts that are happening. Work is changing. As we said, we are now beginning to do more and more work with technology. So whether it's a robot or AI, as you mentioned, is going to disrupt every particular sector or business or role. Two, I think technology also makes it possible for us to take a part of the role. For example, if you're shooting a video, you can shoot the video by yourself, but you can get it edited by somebody. Just put it on Upwork and say, this is my budget, this is what I want done. Is there anybody who's interested? And people bid for it and they get it. So it doesn't matter where the person is located in which part of the world, you can actually
I would like to give a specific example of that. One popular area in Upwork.com is hiring people in Philippines just to like pictures on Instagram.
Wow.
And they do it at very less, obviously. But that is a level of outsourcing going on.
Yeah. And the nature of what is work, think about it. When we put a picture on Instagram or when you put a video up on YouTube, you're actually working hard, making sure it's looking good, getting people to like it and, appreciate it so that another company, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, is making money off that, through putting at advertisements, or Google is making money. So we are doing work which somebody else gets paid for, and we don't. We are doing free work. But beyond that, even the workplace is changing. So it doesn't matter where you are located. Today, it is possible to work in a fairly boundaryless fashion for most of the jobs. Now, there will be some jobs which are harder to do unless you meet the person. But today, even something like, a podcast can be recorded remotely by people. There are sites which allow you to record it, and you can do that. Or, so every little piece, think about stock photography, used to be the mainstay of many companies like Shutterstock.com, but today AI generates faces which you can use. They are free and they are fictitious faces. AI has just created them. So, every little business is going to get disrupted. So the skill that you bring to the marketplace is most efficiently done through technology. So where you are doing it from is irrelevant.
So, as Indians, I mean, right now I know that in the US there's many good companies over there are actually open to remote working, and I see there's a lot of sites that are purely remote focused. But in India, I don't think that is the case, except the international companies that are start beginning to adopt. But I think there's an advantage though, apart from the time zone, in terms of in terms of the skill that is in India in software and all of these areas. People actually can be employed with payrolls directly to companies in the US and all that. What do you think? Is that a possibility?
Yes, absolutely. And there are so many. India is one of the biggest markets there's a lot of coding which gets done for companies outside of India by people who are based out of India, and sometimes in absolutely remote places. All that they need is a connection to the internet. That's all that they really need, and that's the workplace. So wherever the connection is your workplace.
Okay.
And that definitely is a trend that's going to, already it is a very, very fast growing area, and it is behind US. I think it's the second largest gig market, specifically not just for blue collar workforce but also for white collar jobs, and that's growing.
Okay, awesome. I think digital nomads is like the term for that.
Yeah, digital nomads are people who don't really have any one country of location where they are fixed. So, Estonia today, as a country, has given a visa for digital nomads. So, for
Oh,
one
wow.
year, you can work out of Estonia, and that gives you access to all the Schengen countries. And you can register a business
That
in
is the new
just no time.
citizenship.
That's the new citizenship. So it's going to be a virtual citizenship, and yes, you can do that. You
That
can
is
work
amazing.
anywhere.
I think people in the Western countries have a huge advantage in that respect because they're able to afford into Thailand and all these Asian countries and actually start out, with their digital nomadic journey.
No, I have met enough people from India who are digital nomads. I mean, there are people on Instagram you can follow who are digital nomads. I've
Okay.
had an opportunity to engage with some of them. And when you look at that, the work that they do, they write and fund their own travel. They are living in different countries. Uh, a lot of them are travel photographers and travel writers. They get called based on the photographs that they have. They get called by tourism departments of different countries to come and write for their country after exploring. So they're combining their passion, they're writing, they're getting paid, and they're watching all these exotic places which the
That's the
governments are
life.
taking. That's their life. So more and more professions are going to happen. I mean, there are companies which access designs for T-shirts. You can sort of submit your design. If that gets picked up, you get paid. So there are many such possibilities. Work that can be done remotely today through an internet connection is really, it ranges from absolutely the repetitive tasks like what you get on, say, Amazon Turk, those kind of where you click a picture, or it can be complex tasks like, lawyers on demand. There are C-suite people on demand.
Wow.
So every job that is possible can be there, on demand. So the gig economy is eventually going to be a parallel universe, just like the digital universe today is a parallel universe to the physical world. So
Awesome. Right. I just want to ask you about happiness. I've heard you speaking about optimizing for happiness as an employee and why people are like moving towards their passion and things of that nature. And I think, I mean, being digital nomads and traveling and all that, there's a natural, happiness you get out of that. But generally, like, what do you think in terms of, again, employees, like, their current levels of stress or happiness at the job? Could you comment on that? Like,
I think when you sort of really look at happiness is when you're able to bring your full self to work. So happiness is an internal process. Success is an external process. Success is benchmarked with others. It's a relative term. If you think you've become a millionaire at age 30, it might sound like an amazing piece of success until you discover that last year's millionaire was the youngest millionaire was a 7-year-old kid YouTuber who made 23 million. So that suddenly makes your millionaire at 30 look really different. Yeah.
indeed.
So I think success is dependent on external comparison points. And that's what makes us miserable. Chasing success often makes us miserable. And I think when you are able to really work with your own skills, work at your own pace and your own time, have a social process that you enjoy engaging with, is really probably the way that people experience happiness. Meaningful relationships, meaningful work, and having time for a number of things, which are not necessarily monetary. So when you're working in many of the companies, this whole obsession with productivity, that every single moment that the person is enters the gate of a company, every single moment you got to squeeze something out of that person, is probably the recipe for disaster.
But that is such a commonplace. Like I can say that half of my life has been designed that way, where all of my available energy is navigated towards the business results. Is that a healthy scenario?
If the work that you're engaging people for is repetitive, it's the work which today is getting automated, repetitive at scale, and it's rule based. So once you know the rule, you just simply follow. So I ask you to draw circles on a piece of paper 150 times, every minute. So there's a pace. You can do it faster and faster. You're just doing that circle. However, I think the real opportunity comes in when you're looking at choosing to tap into the creativity of people. So if I ask you to, paint a flower in 10 seconds, the quality of the flower that you will do will be very different from what you can do if I said you have 10 minutes to do it. Because creative work actually requires free time. It requires you to reflect within, it requires you to engage with other people, and every such conversation is not necessarily going to be productive, because if you see some of the most creative cultures in the world, have a cafe culture where people seemingly sit down, have a cup of tea, engage. They're talking sometime about theater, they are sometimes talking about politics, sometimes they're talking about themselves. All of this generates ideas, and then they go back and work on something. So the creative process is not a linear process, and the companies which are looking to work on innovation, they definitely have to understand that this whole obsession with productivity, that this guy is here with us for 8 hours, how do we squeeze 5 more clicks out of this person, can we get 3 more clicks after we've hit the 5, actually is a creativity killer. And that explains why so many people are unhappy. I mean, if you're really being treated like a machine, it's pretty unlikely you are going to be happy.
Okay, now can you talk to the bosses of the world in exactly the same effect? Now, I think it's generally the manager who is who is influencing this kind of an attitude towards their team. Is that a fair assumption?
It depends on the business model of the organization.
Okay, so it could come from the
Yeah,
organization
because
itself.
if the business model is about efficiency, is based on efficiency, it's probably going to, so it sort of goes through 2 phases. One, it sort of tries to get most out of people, and in that whole process, then you automate it because it's eventually cheaper to do it, through machines. So that's the work which is, the entire business model is based on efficiency. So
Okay.
it is going to be like that. But if there are business models which are based on creativity, where you are really tapping into ideas, you're tapping into design, you're looking at understanding, solving human problems, those are companies which are really based on working with people and tapping into their creative side. So then they work very differently. Historically, I mean, ad agencies or any of the creative professions, filmmaking works very differently. You don't say that since I'm working with XYZ superstar, I'm paying so many $1 million to that superstar. I'm signing this person. This person has to work for 8 hours. I'm going to squeeze 5 more minutes of work out of it for free. It never works like that.
Okay.
So that's probably the yardstick where your business model, allows for that creativity through interactions, through time, through this lack of obsession with productivity and efficiency. You really can start to think about how do you create something phenomenal. When you look at many of these great film directors, they don't really work 365 days a year. They travel. I have friends who are music composers who spend half of their time traveling, because if you sort of say, okay, how is it related to music? It isn't. But it's this whole process of engaging in multiple things in your life, many interests, many curiosities. And that actually really is the basis of creativity.
Awesome. I just want to ask you, pause here, and how much time do we have?
So, another 5 minutes.
5 minutes? All right. Okay, so before we close here, I just want to ask you about your previous roles. In another life, you were like chief learning officer at one of the biggest companies in India. You worked at one of the best places again in India, like Microsoft, PepsiCo, and all that. And you've headed HR, and you've been a chief learning officer. So could you discuss? I mean, could you tell me about your role over there and a summary of your role and what has the learnings been like?
Um, I think when I spent almost 7 years as the chief learning officer for Wipro, the opportunity was to sort of create a role which looked at the future of the businesses. How it was getting shaped by multiple forces, and then sort of looking at what skills are going to be more important. And the third aspect is how do you build those skills. So it is these three things of looking at the future, understanding, translating it into a skill portfolio, and three, executing it through different creative ways in which you can build the skills. So those are really some of the things that I used to do as a chief learning officer.
And how would you do that at a company like that with such large scale? Like, how is that? How do you bring that to life?
I think some of the things that one was able to do is to experiment with different formats. I remember that the team that I was working with, the team actually came up with many different creative processes. For instance, one time we ran a failure conference.
Wow.
So really asking people what were they keen to pursue, they didn't know, and they tried and they learned and sort of uh, did it better by simply teaching themselves through their failure. We sort of experimented with multiple formats. So we used to do a small little exercise called Friday Funda. Every Friday, for an hour, we would sit down and in our teams and talk about a concept or a book or an idea that fascinated and amazed us. So the criteria was something that was like really jaw dropping,
Okay.
something. And well, sometimes you didn't have something to share, but when you do it in your team, inevitably we found that somebody would come up and say that this is what I thought, and it really changed how I think about XYZ. They were not designed to really say, okay, so now how are you going to apply it to work? We let people find out and discover that themselves. So there was that. And the third example I can think of is, what you referred to, the LinkedIn post with all those drawings. That's where I learned it.
Okay.
I used to send out a weekly post talking about something that caught my attention. It could be a little piece of news, an article that I read, a TED talk that I watched, or an idea that I saw one of our clients talking about. All of that would put it into, it's about 200 odd words, and illustrate it with a small little sketch note. So whether a person had the time to read those 200 words or just simply look at the sketch and get an idea that okay, this is something that got them interested. So I kind of then eventually over a span of time saw my role as building curiosity. So I kind of
Very
thought
interesting.
that it was not really about teaching people how to learn or something. That was a presumptuous perspective. But if one could sort of trigger their curiosity, people naturally learn the stuff themselves. We are
Awesome.
born to explore things which we are curious about.
Okay. Now, as a final note, I want to ask you about your education. You are MBA from XLRI and previously a law graduate. First of all, your views on that. What have and how has that helped you in your helped you or not helped you in your uh, as you began your career?
I think, so I had a degree in economics. I went to Sri Ram College of Commerce, SRCC, in Delhi University. And from there, I went into, doing MBA at XLRI, specialized in human resources. Um, the only difference is I wish I had worked for 2 or 3 years before I had gone in. I went in as a fresher. So a lot of things that I learned there, I made sense of it much later in my career when I saw it happening in the workplace. So there was one shift that today I think if I were to do it again, I would work for more number of years. I wouldn't be in a hurry to get the stamp. When I did it, that was my simple goal. I wanted to have that stamp with me.
I completely resonate with you. I mean, I haven't done a post graduation, but I believe also that some work experience under your belt is gonna put you in a place where where you understand why you're learning something.
Absolutely. And there again, the other thing that when I started work, I also started to do a degree in law in parallel. A lot of that, stayed in the background, but every now and then, it helped me get a perspective, whether it was employment law that I was when I worked in different countries. It helped me understand why the company had a law, why in that particular country the law was written in a certain kind of way. Today, when I'm a gig worker, a freelancer, it helps me understand the contracts which I'm signing. This is not something that I visualized when I was doing my degree in law. So I think the usage of that, sometimes when we look at education, education really creates a perspective. And it's again that ROI kind of a model. I go back to that. If you kind of say that I've put in 8 hours, what am I going to get out of that? That's really the coaching center model, and that kills your creativity. It kills your desire to learn. And so you see that so many people who clear an exam, they get into that course and they never pursue it in their life, and they hate their work because they've trained
Right.
themselves to get into a piece of work which they hate.
It's an unfortunate trap.
That's an unfortunate trap. So instead, if you sort of really pursued that perspective, applied it in multiple ways, and sort of looked at that, I think that's really what enables you to carve your own path. So I would think that the opportunity for me, if I were to sort of really look at that, I would explore many more things along the side. And I think I've benefited as much from my side projects, which have had absolutely no relevance and no payback in the immediate piece. So when I started to sketch, I never thought that I'm going to one day make money out of that. Or when I joined social media, I learned so much, but it was just my curiosity. How does this thing work? But eventually you might make money or you get some kind of an appreciation, but that's not the reason why you start doing it. You do it because you really enjoy exploring different things. So it's really curiosity is at the heart of happiness, in your career. If you sort of look at it, as long as you can stay curious about what you do, you never have that problem that, oh my God, it's a Monday and I have to go to work. You never have to think about it like that.
I love that, and it's the perfect answer to close on. But can I fit in another question?
Sure.
Okay, because I know that you have a strong take on this, which is generalist versus specialist. So I mean, in workplace, these are the two types of people there are. Generalists who have a lot of skills under their belt, but probably not as deep as a specialist who's, example, an Android developer or a Java professional. But in terms of pros and cons, I think it's quite contrast. Could you talk to me about that?
I think we eventually have to find an application of our work somewhere. So when you think about specialist, the specialist has one skill which is very deep, but at the same time, I think a lot of specialists need to put multiple contexts in the work that they are doing. So when you sort of, as a developer, if you're working in different industries, you work in retail and you work in fashion and you work in food and you work in steel, each one of these will provide you different contexts for your work. So the context is the variety. Again, when you're a generalist, the flip side of it works, that you may work in different concepts, different contexts, I beg your pardon. But the skill that you're bringing to the table is getting refined because it's getting applied to those different contexts. In my view, it's the nature of the person. I enjoyed learning many different things. So perhaps that explains why I worked in many different sectors. I worked in advertising, I worked in steel, I worked in FMCGs, I worked in IT. So both on the product side and the service side. So I think it is that opportunity to refine my craft and discover my passion. So when I started my career, I started as a generalist. I sort of did many different things. I did hiring and I did training and development, I did compensation, I did everything. So, but over a span of time, it's like a buffet. You start by seeing everything that is there on the table, and then you sample many different things and suddenly discover. So in my case, I would have discovered that I had a sweet tooth. Then you move closer towards the dessert section. there you might discover that you actually like dark chocolate, which I love, So for me, discovering the dark chocolate happened in the very final stages of, my employment. When I discovered that working in the intersection of technology, learning, and solving a human need and design were all these things that came together, and that is when I decided to become an entrepreneur and go solo.
Awesome. So I think there's like very the huge benefit in being a generalist.
It just allows you to find commonalities across many contexts.
Okay.
So I am a big believer in that because knowing something without necessarily looking at a payback. A specialist will look for a payback immediately. If I'm learning, if I'm going to France, I'm going to learn French. It's an immediate payback. The challenge of that is you don't quite enjoy the whole process of learning that. It's a transaction. You have to just do it so that you can use it. But if you really start with the love of learning something, whether it's a language, the opportunities will actually come up at multiple times in your life. So nothing actually goes waste. It just builds your ability to connect the dots over a span of time,
Okay.
and that is where the thing clicks, and it's an amazing experience because you found the connection, and it makes sense in your own head. So
Okay.
that's what makes you happy, I guess. To
Okay.
your previous question, that's
I,
probably
I was
the
looking for a
secret.
winner.
So it is really that it helps you to discover that little
Okay.
pattern in your life.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Abhijit, for sharing all this valuable wisdom. I just want you to tell us like where can people find you and what should people expect from following your content online
So
and also your books.
thank you so very much, Salman. It's been lovely. I just enjoyed the great breadth of the questions. But like the easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, all the stuff that I post is available to you, or on Twitter at Abhijit Bhaduri, ABHIJIT Abhijit Bhaduri, or on my website abhijitbhaduri.com. You can sign up there, put your email there, and you get all the articles and ideas emailed to you every week, and you can decide whether you want to read it or delete it. So all of that is there, and
All of the good stuff and a lot of creative, happy art.
yes, I love doing that. So you'll see an overdose of that. So
All right. Thank you so much.
thank you
Abhijit, for
so
your
much,
time, and
Salman.
have a
This
good
has
day.
been lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Likewise.